Welcome to the Indian Ocean World podcast.
Welcome to the Indian Ocean World podcast. My name is Dr. Philip Gooding. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Indian Ocean World Centre, and I am the current associate editor of the Journal of Indian Ocean World Studies, or JIWS. And it is partly in my capacity as the associate editor of the JIWS that is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Kaustubh Mani Sengupta, who published an article in our most recent issue, which can be found on the JIWS website. Dr. Sengupta teaches history at Bankura University, India. He studied history at Presidency College, Calcutta, and at the Centre for Historical Studies, JNU, in New Delhi, the latter place being where he obtained his PhD in 2014. He was a visiting doctoral fellow at the Centre for Modern Indian Studies, Göttingen, Germany, and a postdoctoral fellow for 2 years at the Transnational Research Group on Poverty and Education in India, funded by the Max Weber Stiftung in Germany. His research focuses on the urban history of South Asia, the early colonial state in India, and the history of infrastructure and space. He is also keen on practicing historical research in the vernacular, and he writes regularly in Bengali. Along with a few colleagues, he is planning to start a blog in Bengali on various issues of history and history writing from January 2022. His research articles have appeared in several journals, including the Indian Economic and Social History Review, Studies in History, and Economic and Political Weekly. His 2 edited volumes are entitled Rethinking the Local in Indian History, which is published with Routledge, and Debates of History, History of Debates, India's Past and Present Research, which is published in Bengali with Ananda Publishers in Calcutta. He has recently submitted the manuscript of his monograph entitled Carving Calcutta, Space, Economy and Law in 18th Century Bengal, and we very much look forward to hearing more about that. Today, though, Dr. Sengupta has joined me to discuss his recent publication with the Journal of Indian Ocean World Studies, which is entitled William Tolly and His Canal, Navigating Calcutta in the Late 18th Century. Dr. Sengupta, thank you very much for joining me. To start off, can you simply introduce your article? Who was Major Tolly and why did he want to build a canal? But also, how did you come to this topic and what drew to this history of infrastructure in Calcutta?
Thank you for inviting me to the podcast. And this article, it's kind of it's a part of a larger project on public works in early colonial Calcutta during the late 18th century. And in my monograph, as you mentioned, I'm looking at 3 or 4 such projects. So the first one is on the new Fort William. Then there's a project on the dockyard. And then I'm looking at the canal. If I may just, before going into the detail of this particular article, I just wanted to highlight some of the key issues of these public projects in early Calcutta. So the new Fort William, it was a company project. It was a public project in the sense that the company was building it. And the company faced a lot of difficulties in building the new Fort William. And during the same period, a few individuals who were servants of the company in various sectors of the company enterprise, they were keen on improving their fortunes. As I mentioned in one of the quotes of Tolly, you'll find that he's complaining that I haven't improved my fortune a bit during this project. So these individuals, they would venture out into these kind of public enterprises. They would give some proposal to the company, and if the company found it suitable, they would grant them the necessary permission. So this has been the pattern for these projects. I mean, you have discussed Devjani Bhattacharya's book with her in your podcast, and she shows how one such project of Benjamin Lecomte, that project, it's a similar kind of a project. So with Tolly, with this particular project, we find that Calcutta was surrounded by this watery space. There were various canals, the channels, the river Hooghly. Calcutta is situated on the bank of the river Hooghly. which connects it to the Bay of Bengal. So the eastern part of the region, it's the most fertile region, one of the most fertile regions of the world, the Bengal Delta. So various commodities would come to the city, would come to Calcutta through these channels, and it was cheaper to get these commodities via the water route than via land. So when Tolly proposed the extension of this canal and digging up the canal and widening the canal, the company was pretty sure that this was a venture that they would like to have. And we find that this was a particularly important project, as I discussed, that Henry Watson, who was building the dockyard at that during the same period, he was also keen to embark on this project. But the company, and this is not clear from the archive, why the company chose Major Tolly over Captain Watson for this particular project. But anyhow, Tolly got the nod from the company, and he proposed certain terms and to the company, which the company, after various sets of negotiations that I discuss in my article, the company gave him the necessary permission. So the two most important issues that kind of cropped up during these negotiations were regarding the ownership of land that that Tolly needed to build his canal, and the collection of tolls, the duties of the merchandise that would come through the channel. So Tolly wanted to have property rights on the land, but the company and there's here I show how the members of the company board, they were not unanimous in their opinion regarding these issues. So while Tolly wanted the right on certain lands, some of the members thought that it was a preposterous suggestion to give an individual the ownership right, and some thought that yes, we might, but whether it would be prudent. So there was some kind of a dilemma regarding that. But the issue that the other issue that that was quite important for the company was regarding the collection of tolls. And here, the duties that Tolly was charging on the merchandise that would be brought through his canal. And here, when the canal started its operation, we find that some of the older landholders, the cultivators, the as we term them as rats, the cultivators alongside the channel, they were, at least what Tolly kind of complained about, that these cultivators and the older landholders, they were kind of impinging upon his collections, and they were kind of I discussed one such person, Manik Dash. He's Tolly complained that he's collecting tolls on his channel, which was unauthorized tolls, because Tolly was the sole, according to the company lease, Tolly was the sole person who was entitled to collect tolls. But so this issue, I show that with this kind of complaints, we enter into the archives where we find different layers of meanings and different layers of contestations that the company and the individuals had to face during this early phase of urbanization in Calcutta. So, and there, the realm of political economy, the pre-colonial realm of political economy that that the company wanted to replace, we find that through these issues, through these individual projects, what I'm trying to show in my larger project, that through these infrastructural projects, I'm trying to hint at the wider realm of political economy and the wider realm of property negotiation, the wider realm of land jurisdiction. These issues, how the company replaced the old Mughal and the Nawabi settlement and established its own kind of rules and regulations. So from the Battle of Plassey in 1757, when the company defeated the Bengal Nawab, till the end of the 18th century, till the early first phase of the early 19th century, these 40 or 50 odd years, I show that this was a crucial period for company's rule in Bengal, where they established its hold over the entire province. And during this period, Calcutta emerged as the most important urban center of the province, eclipsing the earlier Mughal and Nawabi polities and centers, most importantly, Murshidabad, which was the last capital of the Bengal Nawabs. So, so my archive kind of, it's kind of these disputes. From these disputes, I enter into the wider story of urbanization. And this particular essay, this particular article is kind of, it manifests that, if I may say, that methodology of mine, where I'm trying to enter the story of urbanization through certain dispute, through certain negotiations between the old realm and the new realm. So I'll introduce my article like this, that it's a story of urbanization through the stories of certain disputes and negotiations.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. You open a number of avenues of potential analysis here, which I'm going to pick you up on a couple, I think, which I'd like maybe you could explain some more. Towards the beginning of your article, on page 71, in fact, you point to the, quote, tension, contradictions, and incompetency of merchants and mercenaries working in the East India Company at this time. And I wonder if you could unpack this a little more with special reference to the incompetency. And I think the way you've introduced your article speaks to this as well. And reading your article and listening to your introduction there, it really seems to me that this incompetency is a prevailing feature of the history you describe. In the article, you note that their budgets frequently, the budget for the canal project was blown out of the water almost immediately. And of course, you just alluded to, like, I suppose, unresolved political and land ownership issues, which, to my mind at least, these just seem like utterly predictable results, just from the outset, even from the planning. So my kind of question is, what's the company doing here? Why did they improve this project? Why was there not more oversight at the initial stage? And I suppose, what does this history tell us about the nature of the company, I suppose broadly, but also in Bengal at this time?
Yeah, I mean, if you read the story of construction of the new Fort William that the company itself was embarking on, you will find that their incompetence is, I mean, it's no bound. I mean, the Fort William was built over a period of 20-25 years, and they within a year of its building construction process, they were complaining. The engineers were complaining about shortage of material, about shortage of fund, and the quality of the material, etc. So here also, we find that when Tolly proposed the project, the company initially, even Tolly didn't know how to budget for the project, as we would say that here for a proposal, we need a proper budget, and the company would approve that budget considering various other factors that was at play. But we find that it was not the case, and this has been a recurrent feature for all the projects that I study. So in my understanding, what I find, why I use the word incompetent, is that these people who came to India during this period as servants of the company, they were young. Mostly they were young people, and they were out in the East to make a fortune. Tolly was not that young at this point of his life. He died a few years after this. But mostly the company people as well, they were in their 20s or 30s. and they didn't have a clue of how to rule. They were not administrators. They were mercenaries. I mentioned that these are mercenaries. They were fighting. Maybe they were fighting somewhere in other parts of the empire, and they were sent to Calcutta, to India. They were fighting in down south maybe. Then they were suddenly transported to Bengal, and so they had very little clue. That is what I'm trying to show in my larger project, that they had very little clue. Some of these individuals, they had very little clue of the climate, of the geography, of the rules and regulations of the previous regime, and it was difficult. 18th century India was not an easy terrain, with multiple all over India, with multiple uh, uh, realm and the jurisdictional politics of the period. It was difficult, and for the people who are coming here from outside, just as traders, and then as maybe they were fighting some wars, but they were mainly traders. And the men at London would always remind the men in Bengal and in India that you are employers of a trading company, and you do not go overboard with your wars and with your projects in India, because you need at the end of the day we need profit. So these people, what I'm trying to show is that these people were merchants and mercenaries. They didn't have much clue about administration, and even the engineers who came to India during this period, they were also not very competent. I mean, so the making of the Fort William shows that they had to constantly shift the engineers, transfer the engineers, bring in new people. So these people, they were grappling with the situation as they were going along, and this is true, and this has been true for a lot of other issues during this period, most notably the fixing of the land revenue during this period. I mean, it has been charted quite it, it it is a well documented history now, that from the 1750s onwards, how the company actually faltered on its way towards the permanent settlement of the 1790s. So these issues are kind of, I'm trying to show that these were the issues that also uh, featured in the organizational process of this period.
So you mentioned quite a lot about the nature of or the composition of the company officials at this point: mercenaries, merchants. This gives us the opportunity to, I suppose, have a closer look at Major Tolly, the key figure in your article. Could you tell us more about Major Tolly? He seems somewhat singular. What were his motivations for building the canal? I suppose you note that he came in correspondence with the company that he'd worked for them for 14 years, and in the course of time which, quote, I have not improved my fortune. So I imagine money, or the possibility of money, was a key motivation. But I also imagine that there were other company employees who were in a similar economic position. So in short, my question is, why Major Tolly? Why was it Major Tolly specifically who embarked on this enterprise? Is it because he's older, like you just alluded to? Is there some kind of ambition behind his seniority here?
Yeah, I mean, it's I mean, he comes out as a singular figure because there's very little that we know about him. I mean, even from the archives and from other biographies of other of company people at this point of time, we find very little of these figures. I mean, Major Tolly is one such figure. We have Henry Watson, the other figure who was building the dockyard at this point of time. So these were people who were part of the company army, and they came to India fighting for the company. But also, as I mentioned, that they wanted to improve their fortune. So uh, they were uh, they were fortune seekers in some way. And Henry Watson actually mentions, and this is one of his uh, one of his phrase that he uses in one of his correspondence with the company, that these are private adventurers, that they came to India hoping that whatever meager salary they get from the company employment, that would be complemented with certain other projects. And so these infrastructural projects, they wanted to embark on these projects simply because they wanted to make a fortune. They were the fortune seekers of this period. And we know of people like Clive and Hastings who made a fortune out here in India and then went back to grab a seat in the parliament and whatnot. So, but these were the big figures, the story of the big figures that we know. But when we look at a person like Tolly or a person like Watson, we find that they were equally important in establishing companies' rule in India and the empire in India. So they come out as singular figures because we know very little of them apart from these projects when they enter into the company archives. Otherwise, they are just a name in somewhere in the corner of the archive.
Well, let's pick up on this issue of the archives then, and about the materials for your article. One of the wonderful features of your article, in fact, is your frequent referencing of primary materials. You can really build a narrative out of it, and makes it a wonderful read. And just from looking at the materials, looking at the footnotes you go through, it seems like there's a significant trove of relevant materials to this history across state and national archives in India and the UK. I just wondered if you could talk about your process then. How did you come to compile these materials? Did you set out to do so when you visited the archives in Bengal, elsewhere in India, and in London? Or I suppose did Major Tolly and the other infrastructural projects you referred to, such as New Fort William, did they just keep on cropping up in your other research? And given the wealth of materials, could you postulate on why, I suppose, they've not really been brought to light in historical research before? Were they hidden in some way?
Yeah. So to answer the last question first, I mean, these are issues that you will find in any history of Calcutta. You will find mention of the Fort William, you will find mention of the canal, you will find mention of the dockyard, and etc. But you won't find the story that I'm telling. You won't find the successive stages of the story. You will find that yes, he built that was built in that year. But when I went to the archives, I was looking for something else. As you mentioned, that I was not looking for this particular canal or this particular person. I was actually looking at markets. One of my chapters is on bazaars of Calcutta. So I was looking at markets in the city during this period, and there I found some disputes regarding markets on the banks of this particular canal. So I started following that story. What was the dispute about? Why the canal was important for the markets? So while pursuing that story, the market story, I went to the story of the canal, and suddenly I found similarities between this story and the story that I was pursuing on the dockyard, and a pattern emerged. So the Fort William, the dockyard, the canal. So this was something that then my focus shifted to the infrastructural projects, and I shifted my my PhD chapters kind of to pursue the building of the city. Well, with the look at these individual projects and following these stories. So in a sense, it's kind of a micro historical approach where I built the story of the larger narrative of urbanization through these individual stories. And the material is, as you mentioned, the material is fascinating. I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult to pursue a particular story across archives And often there were moments when I couldn't find the missing piece of the puzzle, and it was frustrating. This particular story was incomplete for almost 2 years before I found the relevant missing information from British Library, and then it kind of got completed. So it's pursuing the story was also an adventure, and it was also fascinating.
Yeah, it sounds it. Right. If you'll permit me, I'm now going to ask a question which I think is possibly more attuned to the work that we do at the IWC here. And that question is about environmental change. Obviously, building a canal marks a significant shift in the way that humans in the region are interacting with their environment. And I wondered how this fits into a broader environmental history. One aspect of this is that if you're going to remodel the environment in such a way, how they do so surely looks remarkably different between seasons, depending on if it's the monsoon season, be the particularly striking one, and between years of drought or years of abundant rainfall. And I wondered, how does the monsoon season affect the design and construction of the canal? Perhaps how did excessive or deficient monsoons affect the canal? And were company officials and/or Major Tolly aware, or to what degree were they aware of the possible effects of monsoonal variation on the canal?
Yes, I mean, so this is an issue that I was not very much aware in the beginning when I was doing starting my research. But over the years, environmental history and environmental issues have become pretty important. And even in my work, I revisited some of my material to find that there are hints that we need to pick up, and I need to pick up and look at the construction process through the lens of environment and through the lens of the changes and changes in the climate. And this comes out, if I may just allude to the Fort William project again, this comes out very crucially for the building of the Fort William, because construction process got hampered due to incessant rainfall. During the harvest season, the laborers who would come to the city to work in the projects, they were actually cultivators back in their villages. So they would go back. The company didn't have any option to keep them at the site. So they would go back to their villages, and the project would be stalled. The material, the bricks, they won't get dried. So the process got hampered due to insufficient supply of bricks and other material. So I found that the climate issue for a project like the Fort William, that was quite central to the way the project was designed. In case of the canal, as you mentioned, that it's the whole terrain, and here again I am indebted to Devjani Bhattacharya's book, which kind of alerted us to the possibility of looking at Calcutta, not to the possibility, but we need to bring in the delta much more centrally to any story of urbanization of the city. So for my project, for this particular essay, I also found that if I need to understand the whole project, I need to understand the watery terrain of the region. And when Tolly was proposing the project, he was also alluding that he was saying that I can cut the channel from a northward direction or from a southerly direction. So this shows that there are options, that the terrain is such that you can actually build a canal, whether you want to go it from the north or whether you want to go it from the south, you can do that. And also the size of the width of the canal, the width of the channel, how wide should it be so that boats could come in. I mean, larger vessels cannot ply the city. I mean, it was not possible. But the width of the canal was an issue that they debated for a long time. And when the company wanted to take over the canal, uh, they sent this person R.H. Colebrook over the surveyor to look at the condition of the canal, and he said that it's not navigable now. So you need monsoon, you need the water, or you need to desilt the whole channel before we can buy it back. So these are issues that I found. These are issues that uh, didn't strike me when I was initially writing when I initially wrote the chapter. But when I was reworking the chapter for the article, I these issues struck me, and I'm now much more aware of environmental issues and environmental concerns.
This then gives me, if you're going to discuss how these issues are affecting your approach moving forward, I think it's an opportune time to ask my final question, and that is basically, what are you working on now? You mentioned you've alluded to your book several times. When can we look forward to seeing this sometime in the near future? Do you want to give more details on your book, or are there any other projects you want to draw our attention to that we can be excited to see in the future?
Yes, as I alluded to my book, because I just alluded to the project because these are very interconnected issues. This article and the other projects. So hopefully it will come out sometime late next year or early 2023. But right now I'm working on a project on tentatively titled as Second City of the Empire, Infrastructure and Improvement in Colonial Calcutta. So I kind of take the story forward to the 19th century of infrastructure, and but the concerns they kind of change. And I'm looking here at drainage and water supply system and road building, the way Calcutta was during this period. So it's kind of an entwined history of epidemics and environment, sanitation and sewerage, and where role of experts and local knowledge. They kind of so it's a kind of a global approach to the question of urbanization at this point of time. And apart from this, I'm also looking at another. I've started working on another project where I look at the role of the city and the village in South Asia. So I'm looking at basically the interlinkages between the city and the village, the urban and the rural in South Asia. And I argue that for an urban theory from Global South, we need to consider the entwined and the interlinked histories of the spaces of both the urban and the rural. We cannot study them in isolation. So that's a long-term project that I'm looking at. I have just started to look at.
Wonderful. I really look forward to seeing how those turn out. They sound incredibly interesting, especially this idea of sanitation epidemics in Calcutta. This speaks to very much my own and the International World Centre's research interest at the moment. So we'll very much look forward to seeing those come to fruition in the coming years. Thank you very much for discussing that with me and your article and the broader project from which it comes. It really has been a pleasure, as it was in our correspondence during the final stages of production for your article. Thank you also to René Mandeville, who by the time you are listening to this will have edited and produced it. And thank you to you, the listener, for downloading or streaming this through Spotify. Once again, my name is Dr. Philip Gooding, and you have been listening to the Indian Ocean World podcast.
The Indian Ocean World podcast would like to acknowledge the generous support of the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. This podcast series is part of the SSHRC-funded partnership project Appraising Risk, Past and Present, interrogating historical data to enhance understanding of environmental crises in the Indian Ocean world.